Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is an entrepreneur, business coach, third generation minister, radio host, and best-selling author all the way from Wyoming in the United States. His name is Steve Kidd. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Christian. I'm doing really good. Thanks.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. I'm used to having guests on the show that have like they wear a lot of different hats. I myself wear a lot of different hats. But oh gosh, there's so many things we can cover here. Why don't we just kind of start at the beginning and sort of walk us through your business journey so far up to this point?
Well, it starts really a way back. I mean, I actually started selling when I was 5 years old. I was selling cards and napkins door to door. My parents
Oh
had
man.
originally actually bought them for my brothers to have a little bit of income. They quickly discovered that they weren't real thrilled about doing that. And, being the 5-year-old that I was like, can I do it? And, they loaded me up with a bag and figured I'd come back, bored in 5 minutes. And instead I came back with an empty bag and a pocket full of money. And I've been in sales and marketing ever since. Jumping forward at 19, I was a sales manager for actually a Kirby company, and worked in and out of that and as consultants for several different companies throughout those years. In 1988, I actually officially started a firm that was a marketing and sales company. And then actually the middle of 1993, 94 is when we began to play in internet space. Back before we actually even had the word internet, I was, an internet marketer. And then in 2007, we began the process of the first book that we put out. And by 2015, had a full program for not just the exclusive clients, but anybody that wanted to join it. And we've been working with authors almost exclusively since.
I come from a marketing background, and I've always kind of recognized that marketing and sales kind of run hand in hand. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're apart. One thing I've always noticed about salespeople, particularly like successful salespeople, is that there's like a particular knack for it. Like, I don't know, like some people might say it's the right attitude. Some people might say it's just like your mindset, or like using certain techniques to kind of get success. Some people say it's just pure consistency. What would you say are the kind of key attributes of a successful salesperson? And like, let's draw it back to you personally. So like when you were 5 years old, that point, there was something there that clicked. What do you think it was that clicked for you?
Well, at five, being a salesperson at 5 is actually really easy. All you got to do is be cute and stick with it. I'm fortunate. I have a very happy-go-lucky personality. So win people very rarely, but when, 5, it's really easy to sell things. But, when they would tell me no, I just didn't take it personal. I figured there had to be something wrong with them if they would tell me no. So it's easy to sell when you're 5. To be able to be consistently a salesperson as an adult, when you have to rely on skill versus just cuteness, it really boils down to understanding, number one, that you're there to serve the person. You're not intending to try to take them. And number two, it's really, my dad used to always say, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we'd listen twice as much as we talk. And if you listen to a person long enough, they will tell you absolutely everything you need to know in order to be able to help them be able to get the thing that they need. And when you're taking that mindset of, I'm here to help you out, and then you listen, it becomes actually pretty easy to be able to then just solve the problem that's keeping them from doing the thing that you two as a salesperson are going to make money off of while helping them.
What you're talking about there is, I think it's a really important issue with salespeople, because I've had like a kind of a mixed bag of reactions when it comes to salespeople over the years. Some good, some bad. I've worked as a salesman myself, and I gotta say, like, as you just sort of outlined it there, the customer tells you what they want. And one thing that's changed in particular over the years now is the access to information. So like back in the 70s and the 80s and whatever, like, yeah, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have necessarily all of the resources readily available to sort of find out what it is you don't know. Whereas now, a couple of clicks, you can at least get like a baseline understanding of what your options are and what the market's saying, and even customer reviews, business reviews, etc. So given that kind of new landscape, like, how is it possible to kind of stick out and be successful in modern sales, given that the power is in the customer's hand now?
Well, it's really interesting because the older I get, the longer I do it, the more that I see that the things that have always been still always are. And it really boils down to people buy from people that they know, like, and trust.
Right.
Until you've established the rapport with the person, they're not going to buy from you. I mean, think about when you've gone into some place really basic, a basic grocery store or something like that, and the person has treated you badly enough that even though you need a necessity, you've walked out of that store. Now, you may go to another store and still buy that thing, but if a person crosses that line, and it's different for all of us, we have no problem walking out of a store. We don't have to be treated that way. The same thing is true in sales, is that we have to build that rapport. We have to tell people, we have to help them see that we care, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that ultimately is what our responsibility as good salespeople and as good marketers is really to show people, I'm here for you. I care. I'm looking for what's best for you. And I really do truly believe that this product, good, or service that I have is going to make your life better. And if we don't start from that place, I remember back in the day, there were salesmen who took the approach of, well, that person is going to be my car payment, and they went in there totally selfishly. And, I've known some people that have made a lot of money that way, but ultimately, long-term, they crash and burn. They end up in a really, really bad place. And, even the multi-billionaires that I've worked with, they will be the first ones to tell you, no, actually, until you give the customer what they want, and help them see if they don't understand that they want it, you're not going to get anything you want.
What about when you're dealing with a particularly stubborn customer, maybe that thinks they know everything, or, maybe they just have a very offish kind of attitude towards salespeople? Because I would say, like, just from speaking from personal experience, it does kind of infuriate me sometimes when you get particularly bullish salespeople, like, they're not listening. I mean, what you've kind of dispelled right there is that it's all about listening, and that is how you indeed get successful and make those sales. And it seems like common sense, but a lot of salespeople don't necessarily go for that. And there is obviously reason behind that. Normally it'd be like managers pushing them for the sales, and there's such a thing as that soft sales versus hard selling and stuff. So like, how do you deal with that, with the customers who are a little bit more stubborn and a little bit more maybe off kind of pushing you away, let's say?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to what I said before. If the person is pushing you away, disbelieving you, questioning you, calling you on your stuff, going to the internet and looking up if what you're saying is true, that means that you haven't done step one, and that's that you haven't built the know, like, and trust. And you need to be humble enough to be able to say to the person, hey, look, I missed a step in here, and I want to step back, because I want you to know that I'm more invested in doing what's right for you than I am whatever decision you make here. I want to make sure that you know me, and that I'm the kind of person that you would want to work with or purchase this thing from, and that I've gained your trust. And, let's talk about what I need to do that first. And if it even means that what I need to do is leave this appointment now and schedule another time, give you more information to research on me, or whatever that might be that particular person needs, you need to do it. I'll give you a perfect example. Cars. Everybody's purchased a car at some point or another. Statistically speaking, the average person spends about 4 hours to purchase a car, between looking at what they're doing and what have you, and the whole process. And buying a car can be really mind numbing, but that's on average what it takes to get a car is about 4 hours. Now, when you talk about people who buy Volvos, who often are analytical and engineer mindset people, doesn't mean that they necessarily work in engineering, but they have that kind of mindset. The average Volvo buyer takes 20 days to make a decision. And so if you are selling Volvos, then Know, Like, and Trust says the very first thing I need to do with a Volvo buyer is give them all the information, give them, in these days, it would be the links and all of the different websites and say, here's the good stuff, but also give them the bad stuff. Tell them, here's what people say bad about this car. Don't try to hide it from them. Tell them it's like this is. I'd love to have a conversation with you about why they said that, why that may or may not be true. And let's really become a team in this and spend the next 20 days researching this together. Let me empower you to get to a place where you feel powerful to make that decision. That's, again, about knowing your customer and then being invested in know, like, and trusting them and serving them versus just trying to railroad them, steamroll them, whatever, into buying something because you need to pay your rent.
I gotta say, like, your approach is very refreshing to hear, and I share this philosophy as well. I always have. I think just in general, not just in business, but just in life, it's always good to kind of approach things honestly. Don't leave anything unsaid. Don't hide things. Like, always build that foundation of trust. However, in the sphere of sales, and I'm not talking for everyone, but this is pretty common in the industry. It's common to withhold information, or maybe not. Let's say to stretch the truth, not outright lie, but you maybe accentuate the positives, hide the weaknesses, as Paul Heyman would say. And I can see why people do that. But there's been times in my life when I've worked for a company and they asked me to lie, and I was like, nope, not doing it. Find another way. Or they would make a recommendation of how to approach something, and I'd be like, I don't, and this is exactly what I would say to the CEO, and I have done in the past. I'm like, well, if we do it this way, we're lying, we're starting off on the wrong foot, and surely if we want to build a reputation as a trustworthy company, it's not going to go well if we're lying or fibbing just to get to that end stage so that we can, have that meeting with that client. I'm talking more about like just client acquisition at this point, as opposed to the sales aspect,
Right.
But so I guess like the question I want to eventually get to with my rambling is, where does this kind of your specific sales approach come from? Because I feel like maybe it's connected with, with your religion, maybe it's part of that, like that particular part of your life. Would you say there's a connection there, or does this kind of originate somewhere else? Maybe a mentor that you had, or certain experiences that shaped your approach? Like, where does your approach to sales come from?
Well, it's the perfect storm, if you will, of all of that. It is growing up. My dad was a minister. My grandfather was a minister, so I do have that background and that integrity that, I've been raised with my whole life. But the truth of the matter is when you listen to, and I've been so blessed to both study directly with some of them and then listen to others that are, from before I was born. When you listen to the teachings of really, truly successful, powerful salespeople, this is the message that goes back across time. And whether you talk about one of my personal mentors, Ernie Villanueva, who was really taking the things of J. Douglas Edwards and others like that, and talking, his speeches and his teachings were very uniquely his own, and he brought himself to it. But the germ, the concept of it was based in things that, going back into the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and I'm sure before that, was the heart and soul and core of the people. You go back to a book like Think and Grow Rich, which was the early 1900s. There's nothing that I'm saying right now that isn't, really, at the core of that in what is being taught in that book. The same thing is in How to Win Friends and Influence People. it is all about that whole concept of caring for people above yourself. And then, a great book, if you've never read it, you got to read this book, Og Mandino. It's called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And Og Mandino goes deeply into it. And if you really do take the time to really read through what he calls the quote unquote 12 scrolls and really learn the concept behind them, scroll one is, I will face this day with love in my heart, and I will approach the morning with love, and I will say to everyone I meet, I love you. When we're taking that approach, when we're already in the place of loving the person before we ever even go into their house or they come into our office or we talk to them on the phone, it puts a whole different spin into it. And, and like you said, it's really not something new under the sun. It's just a matter of really learning from people who have truly been successful versus people who, had a infomercial that made millions of dollars for a while, and then you haven't heard from them for the last 20 years since then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they made their money.
Yeah.
No, I hear you, man. Well, do you know what? On that topic, real quick, like it's always interesting to me when there is like a new fad or a new, let's say, scam or something like that. You can always spot it a mile away because there'll be like a bunch of similar ads that all pop up. And then, as you said, like they all disappear. And it still happens to this day. I see it all the time on Instagram. I see it all the time on like so many of these kind of like YouTube adverts where they're trying to promote a particular way of selling online, maybe like selling through something like Amazon or something. And that in of itself isn't necessarily a scam, but like often these particular techniques that they're trying to push on people are, or, it'll always be like, hey, if you sign up for this thing that, and pay me money to get access to these techniques, you can do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, you can just learn this now, like online, like they're trying to find people that maybe aren't as proactive or don't know to look or whatever. And that I feel like, I mean, because you can argue that part of business is seeking opportunities and exploiting them, and I would agree, but I feel like there's something off when it's targeting the vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? Like to me it just feels a bit off, and technically there's nothing illegal about it, but it is morally unjust. But I don't know, I guess that's a conversation for another time.
Well, I mean, I think the thing that really needs to be said in there is everything is time versus money. I actually use this as part of my sales pitch. There is nothing in modern society that you couldn't learn. Now, there are a few things that you can't do it. Like you can't operate on somebody without certain certificates and degrees and things like that. I mean, not that we haven't read some articles of people who did it, but you're not supposed to, right? But, not... But what I'm saying is that, you could spend enough time online and enough time practicing and those kind of things that you could develop any skill you wanted to. It's readily available at the click of a keyboard these days. But that's your time. What is your time worth? The other option is to spend your money to pay somebody that's already learned that skill.
Right.
And when we as salespeople look at it and say, look, what I'm offering to do to you is to trade your time back to you for the money that you're paying me to do the thing that I already do. I mean, that's what we do at tax season usually, is we pay a tax professional to do our taxes because we hate doing the taxes. And there are people that, believe it or not, I know I'm always shocked when I interview these people, that they love doing taxes. It's fun for them. They get excited for tax season. They're like, oh man, this is my highlight of the year, right?
Just hold that thought for a second. Like you're getting excited about the government taking money from you.
Right. Well,
oh great, here's all this money that I owe the government. Yay!
It's not my thing, but I know people that really being great at doing people's taxes is what is exciting for them. So, it really does boil down to time versus money. Are you going to spend your time, or are you going to invest your money in the time that somebody else already spent?
Fair play, man. Fair play. You spoke earlier about the fact that you've worked with billionaires. I got to ask, is there anything maybe surprising or interesting that you learned from working through them that you wouldn't have known beforehand?
The very first thing I learned about the difference between billionaire mindset and millionaire mindset is billionaires don't spend money on anything. So a millionaire will go out and buy a plane because, and whether you're talking about TV shows we've seen or whatever, there is some effectiveness of having the capability to just go to the airport and fly what you're doing and, do conference calls and all those kind of things. Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad investment, but the millionaire will buy the plane. The billionaire will buy, like my friend Errol Abramson, will buy 3 planes, will rent those planes out, and then when they need to fly someplace, will take one of their planes and fly to where they're going. But the rest of the time, those planes are money generators for them. Their planes don't cost them anything. Their planes actually make their money. A billionaire will, rather than buying a house, a billionaire will build a motel and live in the penthouse, or build a resort and put their property on the edge of the resort, or those kind of things. That's, so that was really fun to learn, is to really see the difference in mindset. Errol is a perfect example. One of the companies, he had 47 companies he started. Every single one of them was a success. He sold them for a profit, had no failures out of 47 companies over the course of his whole entire life. Multi-billionaire. One of the companies that he had is a Canadian company that was a, like health, like health supplements, like, vitamin C, vitamins and minerals and things like that, was a manufacturer of those. And so what he did was he also opened up a, what became chain of stores that sold vitamins and minerals and all of those kind of things. If you're from the United States, we have a company here called GNC. It was the Canadian equivalent of GNC. So he was selling his products in his store and training his people how to be talented and effective salespeople to sell his products in his store. See, that's how the billionaire thinks. The billionaire thinks supply and demand, every end of the supply chain. A billionaire will not just have a product and pay a shipping company to ship it. The billionaire will create the product, own a shipping company, and own a retail store that sells it. It's a really different but really fun way to learn when you start talking to people like that. And I can tell you, talking to Errol, when he would mentor me, it felt like going back to preschool. His thinking was so much huger than that everything that I've done in life, I felt like a preschooler, in life and business compared to all that he's done.
No, it's a good point. I remember years ago, someone said to me that I had to stop thinking poor. And I was like, what do you, like, I took it originally as an insult. I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, you've grown up all your life as a poor person. There's nothing wrong with that. But the way that you approach life is with a poor mentality. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Give me an example. And this is the classic example, but it's like, let's say I go and buy a really expensive, well, not necessarily really expensive pair of trousers, but a pair of trousers that's going to last me like 5 or 10 years, like a decent, good quality pair of, I don't know, let's say Levi's or something, right? If that's still good quality, I don't know. Things change so quickly. But for hypotheticals, over the course of the next 5 years, that's going to last me 5 years, more than like, even with wear and tear, it will probably still stand the test of time. Alternatively, I could go to a cheap store, get myself a pair of jeans for like 10 or 15 pounds, lesser quality, dollars, and that will last me maybe 3-4 months. Then I've got to buy it again. Then I've got to buy it again and again and again. And then throughout those 5 years, chances are I'll probably end up spending more money over that time than I would have if I'd have just bought the expensive stuff in the first place. Now, of course, this doesn't work with everything, but the whole point of what's being taught there is to sort of think in the long term and not in the short term. Sometimes your hand is forced and you have to buy the cheaper things to get by. Believe me, I'm in that situation myself now. But when I see an opportunity to get something that will last over time, or see something that's an investment that will make me more money, like for example, a microphone is a good example of that. You got to look at it like, well, there's a lot of things I can do with this. So it makes sense in the short term to invest a bit more money into this because of the monetary value I'm going to get from this, and other stuff like, the enjoyment and so on and so forth. And I feel like that's a good way of weighing things and approaching things. And also going back to what you said before about, learning from those billionaires, it's de-learning. Whenever we learn something new, we're de-learning. Like when I made the jump from, so we have here in the UK, we call the years between 16 to 18 college, whereas obviously in the States, you call college university. Anyway, those years, when you make the hop to university, you have to de-learn what you've learned, like how to learn. You have to de-learn that and learn a new way of thinking. And I find like whenever you do that, it's beneficial because you're going to learn so much more. But at the same time, you basically just almost have to forget everything you learned before.
Right.
That's mad. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's an important thing, especially when you're trying to make money. It's good to kind of approach it from that perspective of like a blank canvas and go, okay, what's the new mindset I can take on here, and how can I move this forward and, potentially change my life as a result.
Absolutely.
But let's move it forward. So your tagline is bestseller guaranteed. How are you able to offer such certainty?
Well, having done it always helps a lot.
Yep.
I've done thousands upon thousands of people, worked with them and helped them book. I have 100% success rate in making a person a bestseller. Technically my guarantee, I always hate this guarantee, honestly, because it seems so shallow. Technically my guarantee is that if I don't make you a bestseller, I'll give you your money back. And I absolutely would. But again, I have 100% success rate over thousands upon thousands of them. I understand the system that is Amazon, and it always works. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make that happen. So, it's a combination of experience and, and a lot of hard work, really.
Across all of those books, what do you reckon would be some of the key characteristics that they all share that sort of make a successful book that will do and be successful on a platform like Amazon?
So, keeping in mind that, bestseller, in fact, my 20th book of my own is called Bestseller is Only the Beginning. Bestseller is really the start place. It's like graduating from medical school. It's not a place you should achieve to. It's the place you should start from. It's the foundation that you build the house that is your book on. And any other marketing approach these days that doesn't start you at that place is somebody who is still in their process of learning. They need to understand more clearly how Amazon's algorithm truly works. So we start at bestseller. So that's part of it is understanding, bestseller is a credential. Bestseller is like graduating from medical school and being a doctor. Doesn't mean somebody's going to hand you a scalpel and say, here, go do brain surgery. It means that you have shown and been evaluated as an expert at anatomy and physiology and have passed the test. And that's when you rank on Amazon's bestseller list. That's really what you're doing. It's a third party that has a very solid system built that is saying, yeah, this person, passed the test of putting something out. Now, with that said, you ask what makes it quality and what doesn't. The number one piece of that is vulnerability. If you aren't willing to be vulnerable, your book isn't going to connect with people. You have to be willing. Again, it goes back to people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you're not willing to put yourself out there, if you have to be one of these gurus who I've done everything and I'm perfect and I'm wonderful and stuff like that, that just doesn't fly. I mean, it's never really flown, but especially these days, people are just like, whatever, they don't want to hear it. But if you're willing to be vulnerable and say, hey, I know what you're going through right now because I've been through that myself. And I don't have all the answers, but here's what I learned when I went through it. Let me share that with you. If I can just show you one rock to step on going across this swamp, maybe you won't fall in the place that I fell in, and maybe you can miss one of the things that I went through. That's really what the best sort of book is about.
I do regular live streams on platforms like TikTok, and I built up somewhat of a community there. And like, I'm by no means successful in my career. I'm still trying. But one thing that I've had as a comment, which connects with what we're talking about here, is like when people say like, I like the fact that you talk about the good and the bad, and like you keep it real and keep it authentic. And it's like, yeah, I think there's something to that. It is kind of off-putting when you see someone sort of just going on and on about how everything's perfect and everything's great. And it's like, people want to hear about the struggle. They want to know the human being, because as you said before, that makes it relatable. But it's also, I think, being able to picture oneself in the same journey. I can't count how many times someone's reached out to me and said like, hey, you know what, like, because of your live stream, because of that podcast you did, because of this thing that you did, I am now pursuing this, so thank you. And it's like, okay, that right there is your motivation. That right there should be, especially with writing a book, like what you should focus on. It's like, how did I get from this period where I had nothing to this period where I seemingly have everything? It's all about the journey.
Yes. And there's no such thing as arriving. The only time that you win the race of your life, when you cross the tape, you are the victor. That's called death. Everything else should be a continual journey on the race of your life. And not saying that there aren't times that we fall down and we aren't in the lead. But at the end of the day, our life should always be about growing and developing, and even more so about the person that we can serve. And we don't have to, take the whole world on. It's just, who's somebody that I could help today?
Brilliant. I love that sentiment. Let's move it forward. Obviously, you're going to work quite a lot with ghostwriters. So I wanted to ask you about this. Like, talk us how you match ghostwriters with the authors, and then how you can kind of put together this book with the writer and the ghostwriter. Like, talk us through the process of ghostwriting and matching an author with a ghostwriter, and that relationship that forms.
Actually, and this is going to totally blow you away, but I don't work with ghostwriters at all. In fact,
Okay.
I don't, and I know some amazing ghostwriters, and I don't want to disparage them at all. But the problem with a ghostwriter is a ghostwriter is going to get information from you in whatever way. A lot of them do it via interview these days, but then they're going to take your words and they're going to write it in their style. Every ghostwriter that I know, and I know some really talented ones that you have to really be an avid reader to know it. But if you read enough of their stuff, you begin to see the germ of, oh, no, that's that writer. The same thing's true when you start talking about screenwriters. If you watch enough screenplays, movies, plays, whatever, from a particular writer, you will begin to see the germ of, oh yeah, it might be as simple as, oh yeah, their heroes always use 2 guns instead of 1. They like this move, those kind of things, and those little nuances, they come through because all of us are that way. So when I do the writing, actually, and this is the funnest part for me because it's the part I get to do. I actually do it via interview. I just get on Zoom with the person, and I just get them talking. From there, and there is a process to it, and I'm walking them through it. But if it feels like a casual conversation, just like you and I are having, and if in the middle of it they say, does this make any sense? I know that we're on track. We're doing good, because then we're just getting them to just share. Because really your book is about taking that thing that you're so passionate about that every time it comes up, you go off on it and your friends roll your eyes at you because here you go again. That's going to make for just the best sort of book. And my job is just to get on and capture all that. Then we have story development editors who have the capability to go through your words and say, hey, this didn't make sense. Hey, you were telling us the story about Aunt Jan and you never finished telling us what happened to Aunt Jan. Now we're dying to know what happened to Aunt Jan, and they can both take what you said and create flow out of it, but also then ask you the right kind of questions so that you then can either write them or we do a second interview and fill in the blanks from there and make the book so that ultimately the best win in a book is exactly what you were saying. It's when the reader says, I felt like he was talking just directly to me. I could hear his voice, as though he was reading it in my ear.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for that. But then maybe it's because the focus is more on just actually telling a good story rather than trying to impress the reader and be like, oh, this would be exciting. Oh, what if I do this? Oh, what if I do that? Like, it should always be about the narrative and the story. Like, whenever I like pride myself on being a storyteller, and I try to kind of keep things as well. I don't fluff anything up. I tell it how it was, but when I'm describing it, I try not to make it like anything less than what it was. So if I just think like maybe the story isn't that interesting, maybe I just won't tell it. I think that's better than trying to kind of make something what it isn't, or to exaggerate is the word I'm looking for. I feel like that's, especially in the context of a book, is a wrong move.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you are the host of a radio show called We Help You Thrive. Talk us through what you do on the show and how you help people.
So We Help You Thrive is the website for the show. The show is called Thriving Entrepreneur. We had our 8-year anniversary the first week of December of last year.
There you go.
Thriving Entrepreneur is a place to bring, professionals at whatever level and bring who they are and what they do in the world to you and help you be able to see the ways that from what they do, you too can live your life as a thriving entrepreneur. All of us in one way or another are entrepreneurs. Even if you have a regular full-time day-to-day job, you run the business of your own life. And ultimately, you want to, more than any other job that you do, you want to be able to thrive in the business of being you. And so that's what we do, and we've had everywhere from, ministers, spiritualists, just about everything you can think of to, again, accountants and real estate professionals and things like that. And it's just really about that. And then the fun part about it is because I pre-record, every one of the segments with the people. And there's typically every once in a while it's different, but there's typically 3 guests in each one of the shows because it's a syndicated radio show, so we have to fill a whole hour time slot for the radio stations that are playing it. And it's fun to be able to take these totally separate, things. One guy's talking about how to invest in real estate and another guy's talking about, how he did a running with the bulls, and the deeply spiritual significance that he learned in the running of the bulls. And it's like, what is the thread that ties these two together? Because I'm about 3 months from when I did the interview to when, it actually goes live. And so then I have to take these people who over the course of anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks talked about that thing that makes them unique and find the thread that weaves them together. And then, so it's a lot of fun. And people tell me that they love listening to how I bring that together. And I hope that's true. And I'm sure there's times when it's like, okay, Steve, that was a little bit of a stretch. And other times when it's like, wow, I hadn't ever thought about it that way. So it's a lot of fun.
No, I dig that, man. I dig that. I try to do the same thing with my shows, but in a slightly different way. So it's like this show, I feel will be a lot about, kind of deconstructing sales in a sense, like not just from just a pure business standpoint, but also looking at it from, I don't know, just different perspectives, like as a kind of philosophy, approach to life, approach to doing things. I think, and I like all my episodes to kind of explore different themes and stuff, but like if it feels like it's going a certain way, it's like you just roll with it. And sometimes there's more obvious connections, sometimes there isn't. But I feel like a lot of the time, like the show makes itself, and you can just kind of draw the dots afterwards.
Yep.
But I am oversimplifying it. I know what you're doing is a bit more
Oh
complex
no,
and
but it's
stuff.
a lot of fun to do that. Yeah, no, I totally get it.
Awesome, man. What would you say were some of the most memorable interactions you had on your show, or maybe one of the ones that stick out in your mind as particularly inspiring?
Oh gosh, so many of them. I was privileged. I got to do an interview with Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's dad. And we both on and off the show got to talk about a lot of really cool things, both just as dads, as well as, the thing he had, his book that was coming out then was called The DNA of Achievers. That's a couple of books back on him now, but so that was super cool. I'm just an amazing individual, and we just sat down and had a conversation, no different than what you and I are, just like two guys hanging out, and the same was true the couple of times that Errol's been on my show. Here's this guy that's a multi-billionaire. Here's this guy that makes one of the two companies that he was running at the end of his life. We lost him, unfortunately, about a year ago. But here's a guy who's one of those two companies was making $10 billion a year. And he's just sitting down and just sharing his life story and talking about being a street kid eating out of the dumpster because he had no food, and the whole life's journey of that. And so that's really cool. On the flip side to it, I've had conversations with, single moms who, the only thing that they really know how to do is just really let their kids know that they're loved. And that's no less powerful than, Errol making $10 billion a year, just changing the world in that way. So, yeah, I've just been so blessed, mentors of mine, when I first started the show, that's who I started off with, was all my mentors. I was just like, hey, will you be on my show? And they're like, yeah, okay. And then it's grown over the years, and I've gotten to have just so many amazing people. I could go on more than the rest of this show, just talking about all the cool guests that I've gotten to be able to talk to.
Was there ever a moment that was particularly challenging? Maybe a difficult guest, or maybe it was just a challenging topic. And if so, how did you overcome that?
Okay, I told you to be really vulnerable. That's what connects you with people. So I'm going to do that. All right.
All right.
Sometimes it's very rare. I want all of my guests to know that I'm probably not talking about you, but sometimes you do interviews with people who do not know how to express themselves, or are not very good at what they're doing, or worse than that. And this is where it usually comes in. It's somebody who saw something that's trendy or cool, or that somebody else is doing, and they're trying to emulate somebody else rather than genuinely and uniquely being themselves.
Right.
And those can be pretty difficult conversations to get through, because typically speaking, a person like that, you'll ask them the most basic of questions, tell us who you are and how you show up in the world. And, they go off for like 15 or 20 minutes just talking about how great and how wonderful, and, and just on and on and on. And there's no point of it. They're just talking and talking and talking. And, you're like, oh my gosh, I should have slept longer last night, because I think I'm going to fall asleep on this person.
Right.
It does happen, it's very, very rare, but those are the most challenging ones, are when you can tell what the person is talking about is something that they're trying to be versus just being who they are.
Yeah, I think as well, like, it's fine to maybe not have confidence, or to doubt yourself, or to be unsure of who you are and stuff, but like, you got to speak with conviction. Like, I've had all sorts of people on my show, people that were really confident and very extroverted, to people that were a bit more introverted, and I had to, often what that will mean for me is that I have to change my approach a little bit. And you'll notice on my show it's very different. Sometimes it's more conversational, sometimes it's a bit more formal, and it's a bit more like an interview. But so long as my guest is invested in the conversation and wants to have a good conversation, and they want to contribute in some way, then it's going to be good. Do you know what I mean? I think like it's as simple as that. But I think maybe just connecting to what you were saying, like, sometimes there's this, it's like, I need to say something really inspiring, or I need to say something that's gonna, be something that could potentially be clipped up later. And, it's like actually probably the best thing to say is just like the first thing that comes from your mind or your heart that means something to you. Like that's going to be the thing that really moves people, or if nothing else, gives the best representation of who you are.
Yeah. Some of the best conversations I've had with people are people who, they may not be the most articulate. They may use filler words every other word. They may stumble over what they're saying. Their lack of confidence is very obvious in what they're doing. And yet, in the time we're doing it, those have been some of the most amazing conversations I've had. I don't have any problem with that. It's when the person, isn't being real, I guess, is really the bottom line of it, that it becomes very difficult.
Absolutely. A couple of quick fire questions for you that I always love to ask my guests. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh gosh, the best. I think I shared pretty much all of them with you already. I really love Lily Anderson is the one who taught me this, one of the people that I worked with. And it goes back to the phrase that I used before. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People are only going to be as invested as you're invested in them.
It's so true, man. It's so true. Like one of the biggest things I've discovered, especially from doing a podcast, which obviously is kind of a no-brainer, but like listening, man. You want to be a good conversationist? You want people to care? Listen. Just sit down and be like, hey, yeah, I'm interested. Tell me. And then, when they start talking, ask questions and actually listen. Don't just hear the words, but like hear what they're trying to actually tell you. Because that's another thing as well. I learned this about with showing empathy, right? It's like you got to hear like what they're saying in their heart, because sometimes the words don't really mean much. It's just like, it can either be someone just throwing whatever out there trying to express themselves, or sometimes someone is having difficulty expressing themselves or whatever. But like the deeper message, if you're really listening, you'll get it. You'll know, you'll feel it. And that only comes from truly listening. So. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Well, of course, the biggest life lesson is, that Jesus loves me. I was interviewing my dad about a year before he passed away, and I asked him, he was 81 years old then. And I said, what's the biggest thing you know? And he just broke into song and sang, Jesus loves me. And, more than anything else in the world, the fact that the creator of everything, I like to put it this way. God, however you want to define him, and and I don't want to even get into that, but God, to be God, is the person who everything that we know as existence was one thought that he had one day. And when you then understand that the being who has that kind of capability wants to have a personal relationship, wants to know you, created free will so that you could choose not to love him because he wanted to love you and give you the choice to truly choose to love him. That's the most mind-blowing thing I could think of. We could go into, less esoteric, more business-related things if you want to do. But as far as just the biggest thing I know in the world, that's about as cool as I can think of.
Awesome, man. As we draw things to a close for today, do you have any upcoming projects or some final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, of course, number one is somebody's waiting on you. You absolutely do need to share your message with the world. I can tell you from a marketing standpoint, I've been in this world for a lot of years. You will never maximize the possibility of what you're doing if you don't tag it with bestseller. If you don't have a best-selling book, if you're not a best-selling author, you will never get to the level that you could have with that included in it. And so absolutely, somebody is waiting on you. There's somebody who's making a bad decision, doing things the wrong way, whatever, because you haven't shared what you know. And for the right people, Even though you may be saying something that they've heard a million times before, they will hear you say it, and it will be like water to a person dying of thirst in the desert, and it will be, in some cases, literally the difference of between life and death. So that really becomes the number one piece of that. And as far as what I'm doing, of course, obviously, I'm always helping authors put out their books. We're in the process of building my own community, my own app that will be a community for people who are anywhere on their author journey from, I think maybe I want to do it to, I've written 100 books and everywhere in between to really come in and grow together and share with each other. And that'll be upcoming. But to be in the circle of it, the best thing I can do is give you a free gift. And so I created a guide that I call the Ongoing Wealth Guide. If you go to ongoingwealthguide.com, you can get that for free. It's just a really basic 5 steps to be able to really, truly generate ongoing wealth. And by wealth, I want to make sure I define that. That's abundance. That's the ability that no matter what the bank account says today, you have provision in your life and you have the ability to do the things that can then again bring money into your life. And if you will follow that path, it will actually help you create ongoing wealth in your life. Ongoingwealthguide.com. And just so you know, in that is my free Write Your Bestseller in 1 hour workshop. There's a link to that right in that. And once you get it, if you get to the last page, I'm even actually giving people 15 free minutes to talk to me about anything in their sales and marketing realm that I can do to help them.
Brilliant, man. Thank you so much for all the knowledge you've shared today and the wisdom and such. And yeah, just for being a great guest. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Christian. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, as always, I hope you enjoyed the episode. And I'll see you very, very soon. Be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.